What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and there was no media? No newspaper, magazines, or books. No radio, music, audio books. No TV or movies. And God forbid, no internet or social media. Not even any texting. Media is all around us. We get our information from it. We socialize with others through it. We're entertained by it. And we even develop parts of our personal identity and confirm our personal identity through media. We spend huge amounts of our time on media. In fact, studies show that by the time we're 65, we'll spend the equivalent of 18 years of our lives watching media. In this video, we're going to look at some of the theories behind how media affects our lives and how we can manage media in our lives. The first theory about the impact of media is the agenda setting theory. And this basically says that media tells us what to think. This theory argues that by their editing power of what we see or don't see, the media determines what we watch, read, and hear. If they put a topic on the agenda, then it's relevant. If they take a topic away, then it's not relevant. They can increase or decrease our exposure to an idea, and they can even distort its importance based on how much they cover the idea. You can see the difference in this agenda setting that media does if you look at Fox versus CNN. These two stations focus on very different issues for their viewers. This brings us to another theory about the media and how we use it. There's the selective exposure theory, and this says that we tend to go to media that reinforces our own attitudes, values, and beliefs. So we seek out Fox or CNN based on how we believe. It says that we don't watch video or media or even print or even things on the internet that oppose our points of view. We're 36% more likely to watch those things that reinforce what we already believe in our mind. Another theory that looks at the impact of the media is the cultivation theory. And this theory argues that TV encourages a distorted view of the world. It argues that TV is more crime-ridden, high-status, high-career-oriented. This gives a distorted view to what the real world looks like and ends up having impacts on people. For example, in a study among teens based on their level of TV viewership, high TV viewing teens expected life to have higher incomes, higher status, higher crime, and to be more lucrative. They expected to start out in their professions with high-paying salaries. Studies have also shown that high TV viewers tend to fear violent crime more than lower TV viewers. So cultivation theory argues that there's a real world and the TV world, and that the more someone views the TV world, the more they distort that to be the real world. The media also influences our economic behavior through advertising. There's $600 billion a year spent globally on advertising. A great deal of media and time is spent determining our attitudes and viewership and our internet activities in order to spend those ad dollars correctly. This has led to some practices that may or may not be ethical. And this happens when you go to an internet site and they put tracking software on your computer when you register or enter that site. This software tracks your behaviors, websites you go to, and then it is later sold to companies so that they can know more about you and know how to target you. Don't just assume it's shady on the edge websites that do this. According to a recent study, the 50 most popular websites each add up to 64 pieces of tracking software to your computer. After they gain all this information about you, they then sell it to other organizations. There are also political influences of media. There's political ads, political debates, and we all know that there's a great deal of political commentary through the media. The media is also used to promote health and wellness campaigns. So we'll see smoking cessation type messages and other messages to help us behave more healthily in our life. One area of a great deal of study on the media has been the impact of the violent images we see on TV and how they impact us. In a recent study, the data showed that by the time an individual was 18 years old, they had witnessed 32,000 murders and 40,000 attempted murders on TV. Researchers have suggested that this type of prolonged violence exposure can have a negative impact on the health of individuals, especially young children. Some researchers argue that this type of media desensitizes us to violence and makes us more accepting of violence. This is called the media desensitization theory. Other researchers argue that the media depicted violence encourages or causes violent behavior. This is called the media catalytic theory. There's a growing body of research that suggests that these two theories are accurate and that there is an impact of this violent media. However, there's also many studies that have been conducted by video game manufacturers, TV and movie makers that suggest the exact opposite. So there's huge questions about the validity of the research on both sides. Today in the United States, TV and radio are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. Notice that this includes a very small subset of the actual media that we receive. The Federal Communication Commission, or the FCC, determines rules about what can and cannot be broadcast and basic fairness rules. The first such rule is the equal time rule, and this basically says that if time is given to one political party, equal time needs to be given to another party. So this is what you see when you see the State of the Union address. You see it broadcast and then an opposing political view broadcast after. One current controversial issue relative to the FCC is the Fairness Doctrine. The Fairness Doctrine was a federal law that required a broadcaster to air all sides of a public issue. This meant that if there was an issue of public interest, they had to cover it from all different angles and perspectives. They couldn't just cover it from one perspective. In 1987, the Fairness Doctrine was abolished. This means that any entity regulated through the FCC no longer was required to air all sides of an issue from all angles. It's an interesting decision and change. And do you think you can see or feel it in our society? Currently, there have been many bills proposed in Congress to bring back the Fairness Doctrine. This is something to think about. Is this an important issue for our society? Before we end this lecture today, I want to give you some guidelines for thinking about messages you receive through social media, TV, or any other mediated source. First of all, who's the source and follow the money? Who has an interest in you receiving the message? What's their agenda? What is it that they would like to gain from you as a result of the message? Second, calm down. Recognize that the news makes its viewership and ratings by creating crises. Evaluate, is this crisis really a crisis? Third, Consider the source of the messages. What's the credibility of where you're getting the message from and who you're getting the message from? Fourth, do some fact checking. Find out the source of the information. See if you can find the information from other credible sources and people. Use Snopes. It's useful to find out what's actually true and what's not true. When you're reviewing the news, don't just look at the headline. Often the headlines are distorted and meant to attract your attention. They can be very misleading. When you have time available, make sure that you actually look at some of the source documentation. It's amazing to me often to watch the source of a news conference and then look at the reporting on it. They don't seem to be referring to what I saw. Check for bias. This can often be done by looking at the language that's used. So are people patriots or freedom fighters, or are they traitors? We see a lot in this in our news coverage today. And the best advice I can give you is to get your news from multiple sources. Get it from conservative sources, get it from liberal sources, and make up your own mind. I hope that you'll put these guidelines into practice. I think they'll help you sort through the media world a little more healthily. And that's it for this lecture. I hope you've learned a little bit about media, and have a great day.